everyone, how's it going? So this is going to be our class 1 session 3. So this is just briefly looking at masking inside Photoshop, and the purpose of this is if you want a specific image to go into a InDesign document, or if you want to work in Photoshop with an image that doesn't contain a background. So for example, over here in front of us I have an image of a bird and I don't want the background anymore. I just want the bird itself with a transparent background. So what this session is going to be how you can mask out background completely so that you just have a transparent image of a bird, and that Photoshop file you can then import it directly into InDesign, and it will hold its properties of being transparent and just have your subject which you want that is completely opaque that you can use. So what I'm going to be doing is showing you two different ways of doing it, which is going to be manual masking, and the second way of doing it I'm going to be looking at the flower pot over here, how you can use your different RGB channels to help you create a mask much easier. So the first way which you're going to do is you're just going to open up the image. The links for both the images can be found in the description of the video. They're both stock photos from Pexels. So for this image over here, all I did was I unchecked the lock function, so it was locked and the layer said background. I just unchecked that function, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create a mask. So this icon over here at the bottom right hand side, this is going to activate a mask. So as soon as I do that, you can see that there's now a white workspace right next to the preview image of our layer, and nothing happened yet because everything that is white with regards to a mask will remain. Everything that is black will be removed. So right now I'm just going to select black on my paintbrush, make sure that I'm not on the image layer, I'm on the mask layer over here. And if I just draw with the brush tool being black on the mask, as you can see over here, I drew a black line. Everything that is black will be removed and everything that is white will remain. So this is essentially creating a alpha mask, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing. So this process is going to be rather manual. So I'm just going to start off, before I begin masking, what I prefer to do is to create an additional separate layer, drag it to underneath the image layer where we're going to be doing our masking, and I want to give it a random color, something that will provide quite a bit of contrast. So in this case I'm thinking something along the lines of a bright pink or purple, and I'm just going to press G to hit my paintbrush, and I'm going to fill the entire layer. So what that's going to allow me to do now is, once I start masking, is that I can easily identify that everything that is pink is now gone, instead of looking at the transparent background, because things can become quite tricky. I also just want to make sure that the hardness is quite high. We're looking maybe like 92%, 91%, somewhere around there. As you can see, there's quite a bit of a blend over there, and that's because of the hardness. So right now, much better. Make sure that my mask layer is selected, and I want to just start removing the background as much as I can. Sure that I'm working with black. Yes, everything is good. So I just made the brush size quite big for now. I just want to get rid of the general background area as much as I can before I start working on the finer details. So this is just a basic sort of masking tutorial. We're not going to go into anything super hectic with regards to masking out hair, because there's a lot of different approaches and techniques that you can use for that specifically. So now I'm just going to be zooming in quite a bit. I'm going to readjust my brush size, and I'm going to start going into mask out the bird. So what I'm doing as well now is I'm holding down shift while I'm clicking, and what that is allowing me to do is that it's allowing me to get an average between my two selections. So for example, I can either go freehand, I'm just holding down my left click and dragging, or if I click somewhere and start the erase function or the masking function, I hold down shift and I click somewhere else, it'll draw a straight line. So if you continue this by holding down shift, then you get sort of quite a nice gradient, and it allows you to have a little bit more control, and you generally have less mistakes than doing it completely freehand. So right now all I'm going to do is I'm going to time-lapse through this portion of the video just so that we can get through the masking part of it relatively quickly. Okay, so I've just sort of gone through the masking process. It's not exactly perfect, but obviously this does take quite a bit of time and a lot of refinement. You can see like there's errors over here, you can do a little bit more work over here, especially over here on the top of the head, this portion as well, and over here by the feathers as well. So the one thing that I just want you to bear in mind, so all I want to do now is I just want to show you, delete that, make that invisible. So all I did now is I just duplicated the base image again just to show you what I did remove, what I didn't remove. So generally speaking, this whole top portion over here of the head, do it this way, this whole top portion of the head as well as this lower part of the body, that all turned out to be quite fine, no big issues there. I decided to remove the foot because I didn't want to keep the this wood stump, so instead I just followed the curved line of the body over here and I worked that way. So I just followed the curve of the body. You can see it's a little bit bulgy, so I'd have to just smooth that out quite a bit more. Another issue that I sort of found with these feathers that blended quite a bit in with the background, so you can take the time to go in and delete all these tiny little individual specks of background over here, but even if you do that, then your image with the transparent background might not look as professional. So I just want to implore you to take some creative freedom with this. So for me, I figured that these parts of the feather, yes, they do help complete the image, but I don't find them to be super necessary. So by removing them, it didn't seem like there was quite a big problem. Another element over here that I still need to work on quite a good amount is this top portion of the feather, because the same sort of principle applies. There's a lot of individual small fibers and hairs that you'd have to go in and try and manually fix and sort out. But other than that, I think everything turned out quite well considering what we're going to be using this for. So what we're going to be using this for, we're primarily going to focus on this portion of the image. I'll show you. So we're going to focus on the top portion of the image, not so much the bottom portion of the image. So we're going to be focusing on this top portion, and this top portion looks relatively fine, just a little bit of issues over here, in fact maybe a little bit lower, so somewhere about here. We're going to be focusing on this portion primarily. So when you go through this activity, try and get this mask as clean as possible. And again, if you do find that there's a mistake, for example, if I want to go back in and fix this up, I'm just going to select the mask. I'm going to make sure I'm on my brush tool. I'm going to press B and increase the size a little bit. And I'm going to make sure I'm going to be using white. So every time you use the brush tool and you paint with white, then you're going to reveal the image. Black is going to remove the image. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on white. And every time I paint now, I can start revealing a little bit more of the image. So now I'm obviously doing it way too much, but you can see what my idea was. I'm just press X again. I'm going to go to the black brush, try and see if I can get something a little bit more decent. But again, it does take time and it does take effort. So I'm going to be refining this, sort of get to our finished product. But like I said, we're just going to be primarily focusing on this part. So the goal for this way of masking is to get our bird completely cut out from the background. Now moving on from that to focus on the flowers. So this is a different type of technique using the same masking principles. So again, we're going to be using the mask to create a mask, but we're going to be using the different types of channels of the actual image itself. So right now you can see that this image, if you go onto the channels tab over here right next to the layers, there are 3 different channels. You get your red channel, your green channel, and your blue channel. And these are the grayscale values of red, green, and blue, so the RGB grayscale values. And this is going to help us out quite a bit, because what we want to do is we want to look for the channel that contains the most amount of contrast. So just based off these 3 over here, I can immediately see that the blue channel has the most amount of contrast. So what I'd like to do now is, let me just explain that a little bit better. If I look at the red channel, I just want the flowers, not the background and not the jar. So right over here, I'm trying to see which channel has all the flowers either in white or in black, and the background must be the complete opposite. So this channel won't necessarily work because there's a lot of flowers that are extremely white, they're blending with the background quite a bit. The green channel is a little bit better because there's a bit more detail, but I'm not looking for detail, I'm looking for high contrast. If I go over to the blue channel, I can see that all the leaves and the flowers are completely dark in comparison to the background, which is more of a lighter gray. So I'm going to be working with the blue channel. So what I want to do now is I'd like to duplicate this blue channel so that I can mess with it and add adjustments to it. So I'm going to select the blue channel, I'm going to left click and drag it all the way down to the little plus icon, and that's going to allow me to duplicate the layer. So now I've created a duplicate layer which is called blue copy. And from here I want to add adjustments to this layer. As you can see though, there's no adjustment tab over here at the bottom. So if you go into the layer, then here is the adjustment icon. This is the circle that is half filled and half just has a stroke. And if I click on the blue copy, I don't have that option. But a way to work around this is that if we go to the image tab on top over here, on top of your workspace, we can go to the adjustments and we want to add levels. So this is sort of a workaround to adding adjustments to one of the channel layers that we have duplicated. And my goal now is to try and get this image to represent as much of a mask as possible, meaning solid blacks and solid whites. So I'm going to start increasing the amount of white that is displayed. I'm going to start increasing the amount of black. I'm going to continue this process until the background is more or less completely white and the foreground is more or less completely black. So this is the closest that we are sort of going to get, and which is absolutely fine. I'm going to click OK for now. And all I want to do now is I want to go in with my brush tool and I want to start painting out all these little black specks. So I want to make sure that I have the white color selected over here on my preview. I'm going to zoom in slightly and I'm going to begin to just paint out some of these black specks. If you can remember what I mentioned in the previous masking technique, is that everything that is white with regards to the mask you'll be able to keep, and everything that is black will be removed. So right now I want to keep the flowers, but the flowers are black. So at this point that's not necessarily a huge problem, because when we add this into the mask then we can just invert the mask so that the flowers become white and the background becomes black. So right now while I'm working with the channels, it doesn't matter which element is black and which element is white, because I will be able to invert it. So all I'm going to be doing now, I didn't focus too much at the bottom of the jar because I don't want to keep the bottom of the jar. I'm going to sort of cut off the flowers around about this point, remove the jar completely. What I want to do now is I want to make a selection on this black and white that I've just created. So to do that, I'm going to make sure I'm on the move tool, which is just a shortcut V on your keyboard. I'm going to hover over the image the layer. So my blue copy layer, I'm going to hover over the image display. I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to left click. And what that's going to do is that it makes a selection for the entirety. It's going to make a selection for the white space, everything around the black. And if I go to my layers now and I select the my actual image layer, you can see that that selection transferred over. So if I go click on my mask icon now, you can see it does exactly what it's supposed to do. Everything that was black gets removed and everything that is white remains. So I'm just going to undo, and to fix this, to invert the mask, I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to select my mask again, and that way it creates a mask that is inverted. So everything that was white in my channels over here is now black, and everything that was black is now white. So that means that my flowers remain, whereas the background is completely gone. And this gives you quite a nice, accurate selection, but there are some issues. And to see those issues more clearer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to add a full color to it so we can see exactly what we're working with here. Same principle as what we just did with regards to the bird. I created another layer and I filled it with a random color of high contrast so we can see exactly what the mask is. So I want to be working with the mask now because I can see that there's a couple of errors and issues. And I'm going to select the mask and I'm going to select my brush tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm painting with white, so everything that is white will remain. I can see my first issue is going to be this flower over here, so I'm just going to rebuild this flower, just adding some more white back over here. Just want to be careful not to go over the actual spaces in between the leaves, but this sort of area, this is just general highlights that have been removed, so I'm just going to fill these back in so we can keep the structure of the plants. That's fine, a little bit more there, that's still good. Zoom in a bit more. So again, this is just about now fixing with regards to the mask. No mask is going to be extremely perfect, so also just bear that in mind. You're always going to have to go in and make some final adjustments to it. That's pretty fine. I just want to see if this is a background or if that's actually part of the plant itself. It could just be a highlight that got selected with the white background. So again, just a little bit more rebuilding on this side. Just adding to the mask. A little bit overboard there. Rebuilding over here, rebuilding here. Just continuously rebuilding. Something here. And there. And this entire leaf needs to be sorted. The entire leaf over here. So the majority of the image that was removed inside the plant over here, that was just highlights. So that's not necessarily the background. So the background color, it's more of that, and we can see how it's quite similar to the highlights in the plant itself. So that's where this issue came into play. So again, I'm just going to be rebuilding this. And then once this is finished, then you have your image with the transparent background. See, this needs a little bit more rebuilding. Just going to add more so I can see exactly what I need to remove. Rebuilding here and here. Getting it sorted here too. So the purpose of this is we're going to be looking in our next class. We are going to be looking at creating a interactive calendar inside of InDesign, and that's going to use this plant image as well as the bird image as sort of the forefront image of the calendar itself. So just something that's quite nice to add to the calendar, and it also shows you how you can just remove backgrounds on images inside Photoshop and how you can import the Photoshop file itself directly into InDesign. You can also save this out as a PNG. PNG file format holds the transparency background, and that can also just be imported directly into InDesign and treated like a normal image. I'm going to be switching over now to black because I just want to remove this whole sort of section over here. This forms part of the jar that I want to remove, and I'm just going to paint over this with black just to get rid of it. Get rid of this whole section. And now we have our plants. We have our plants and we have our bird. So when we're at this point, I would suggest just removing the color background, and then we can save the different images as Photoshop files. So we're going to go saving. This is masking Photoshop, so that's fine. I'm going to leave it just like that, or let me recall it bird underscore mask, bird mask. It is saving as a Photoshop PSD file. That's fine. I'm going to save it. Once it decides to save, yes. And the same thing for the flowers. I'm going to say file, save as, and this is going to be flowers underscore mask. And we'll save that as a PSD file. So what's really nice and interesting about importing actual Photoshop files into InDesign and not just the PNG, if I have to come back into Photoshop and open up the imported PSD file. So if you, right now we have saved this as flowers underscore mask. If you import the Photoshop file of flowers underscore mask inside of InDesign, and you notice, I actually want to keep the jar that the flowers were in, all I need to do is find that flowers underscore mask PSD file, double click it, open it up in Photoshop. I can make adjustments to the mask. I can decide, okay, I want to bring back the jar. This is just very rough now. I want to bring back the jar, and then I'm going to clean it up quite nicely, and I'm going to save it as a PSD file. Once I save that PSD file, if I go back inside of InDesign, all the changes that are saved in Photoshop will now reflect directly to the file that's inside of InDesign. So that's quite a nice way of working, and the same thing applies with Illustrator. So that's the benefit of working with these different Adobe workflows, so that you can go back into Photoshop, make adjustments, add different things, add new graphics, adjust the mask, add more images to it, save it as a PSD file, and then the changes will automatically update inside your InDesign file. So I'm just going to go back to the bird, and I'm going to see if I can demonstrate this to you now. So if I open up InDesign, I'm just going to, not open, sorry, I'm going to say file, new, not a book, file, new document. I'm just going to go normal for print. I'm going to look for the A4, say create, that's fine. I'm going to say file, I want to place, and I want to look for the bird that we just created. So the bird mask, I'm going to say file, I'm going to place the bird, show them on my selection tool, and I'm just going to shrink this, move it up, and I'm going to shrink the bird image itself. So right now we have the bird image, and I just want to change the display quality to high quality, so you can see the bird image, and it has the transparent background exactly how we had it inside of Photoshop. So right now if I go to the mask and I go to white, which makes things visible, I'm just going to start adding in this bottom portion of the stick. I'm going to leave it like this, very rough, so that when I save it I want to show you what it does look like. So I'm going to save, and if I go back inside of InDesign, you can see that there was a little bit of an icon there, and once I click that little cautionary icon, that little yellow icon, then it automatically updated for me. So all the changes I made inside Photoshop now reflect inside InDesign, and this works the same if you're working with Illustrator. So once again, I'm just going to click Ctrl Z to undo, to remove what I just added. I'm going to say file, save, and once it's saved, I'm going to go back inside of InDesign, and what you can see now is you still have the previous save, and at the top frame over here there's a little cautionary icon. It says that this was modified. I need to click to update, so I'm going to just left click that, and you can see over here it has the Adobe chain link, and everything is now linked. So that's how I can mask images inside of Photoshop and then bring them into InDesign, and if I make changes inside of Photoshop, then automatically once I save it, the changes will reflect inside of InDesign. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. I hope this is quite helpful and useful. Please, I know that there are many different ways of masking. You could have used the pen tool instead of just going in with the brush tool. You could use the selection tool. I'm well aware that there are various ways of masking. I feel that this way has allows you to have a lot of control. Plus, from what I've noticed is that a lot of people are not that comfortable with using the pen tool, so I didn't want to focus this activity on using the pen tool. Yes, of course, if you feel comfortable with it, use the pen tool, right click, make selection, and then add a color to it while you have your mask selected. Then you can use the pen tool. I'm not sure what your skill level is with regards to using the lasso tool or the magic wand, so that's why I figured having more control using a brush would make a bit more sense, and it will make the activity more easier and more enjoyable. So again, I'm well aware there are different ways of masking. This was just a nice manual way to allow you to have much more control, and for something that's a little bit more fast and efficient by using the channels to make a selection, this is also quite a nice way of doing it. So again, I hope this is quite informative. I hope this helps you, and these two images will be linked in the description below. Please go download them and cut out these images. I'm quite reluctant to say cut out, let me rather say mask these images inside Photoshop, save the files, because we're going to be using them when we make our interactive calendar. So again, hope you enjoyed, and peace.